We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, coming up in the next hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will pursue war against Hamas to the end. Defense Minister Gallant says Hamas has lost control in Gaza. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is in US to attend IPF. APEC meetings, holds bilateral meeting with US Trade Representative Catherine Tai on sidelines of IPF. Also holds meeting with his South Korean and Singapore's counterpart. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar meets UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. Also addresses Indian community in London. And the 42nd edition of India International Trade Fair 2023 is set to be inaugurated today in New Delhi. Over 3,000 exhibitors from both India and abroad to participate. On to details now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday met with commanders and soldiers of the Caracal Battalion at one of the assembly points near the Gaza Strip fence. During his visit, the Prime Minister thanked the soldiers for their service and asserted that Israel will pursue war against Hamas to the end.
An extraordinary achievement, truly amazing, there are no words. I think that what you have done here, you simply decided the battle here. Men and women soldiers with daring and extraordinary resourcefulness. Well done. This says a lot. To turn the tide from the worst situation imaginable, this says a lot. This is also what we are doing now with the forces that are inside. This is neither an operation nor a round, but a war to the end. It is important to me that you know this. This is not lip service, but from the heart and mind. If we do not finish them, it will come back.
An Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, has said Hamas has lost control of the Gaza Strip. It has ruled for 16 years. After an assessment of the fighting, Gallant said Israeli forces are advancing according to plans and carry out the tasks accurately and lethally. He said IDF has intensified activity against Hamas tunnels in recent days. The Israeli Defense Force spokesperson said the Israeli military is operating inside Gaza to ensure the safe release of the 239 Israeli hostages and is combining all three modes of land, air and naval forces in the war. Well, this comes as the Israeli military claimed that Hamas was using hospitals for hiding and storing weapons in Children's Hospital basement in Gaza, adding that hostages were also likely to be held there.
I went to the hospital with a video camera and personally documented more concrete evidence. The concrete evidence are that Hamas uses hospitals as an instrument of war. Underneath the hospital, in the basement, we found a Hamas command and control center, suicide bomb vests, grenades, AK-47 assault rifles, explosive devices, RPGs and other weapons, computers, money, etc. And we also found signs that indicate that Hamas held hostages here. This is currently under our investigation, but we also have intelligence that verifies it.
Well, the Israeli army has said on Tuesday that its fighter jets had struck Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in Lebanon in response to launches towards northern Israel over the past few days. Video released by the Israeli Defense Forces showed what it said was several aerial views of targets being hit, including a number of operational command centers in which Hezbollah operated. Weeks of hostilities across the Lebanese-Israeli border have escalated, with growing casualties on both sides and a war of words fueling concerns over wider conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed Lebanese group Hezbollah. Meanwhile, the White House on Monday said that the U.S. is working to get the release of hostages held in Gaza.
We have been very transparent about the fact that we have limited visibility into both the whereabouts of the hostages within Gaza and their condition. And I said as recently as yesterday that we have 9 missing Americans, 1 missing green card holder, and I cannot look in the eye and tell you how many of those hostages are still alive. We do have information, and I'll be careful about how I characterize that, about some of the hostages and a notion that there are a substantial number of hostages who are not just alive, but who could potentially be part of a hostage release. But I couldn't give you a number of exactly how many Americans would be included in that. That's something that we will have to work through as we continue these negotiations. And of course, we won't know for certain until we actually get the release of those hostages and they're safely returned to their families. So that's something we're going to continue to work on.
Well, the armed wing of Hamas has said they told Qatari mediators that the group is ready to release up to 70 women and children held in Gaza in return for a 5-day truce. Spokesman for the armed wing of Hamas said the truce should include a complete ceasefire and allowing aid and humanitarian relief everywhere in the Gaza Strip. Israel launched its campaign last month to annihilate Hamas, the group that runs the Gaza Strip, after Hamas gunmen rampaged through southern Israel, killing civilians. Around 1,200 people died and 240 were dragged to Gaza as hostages, according to Israel's tally. And moving on, the U.S. Supreme Court has formally adopted its first code of ethics after press reports earlier this year revealed justices accepting lavish vacations and gifts paid for by rich benefactors who often had strong political, social and religious beliefs. Tony Waterman has more.
In a brief statement released alongside this new code of conduct, the justices said that the rules are in fact not new at all, that the principles have always governed the court's conduct. Included in the code are 5 canons of conduct requiring justices to refrain from political activity and to uphold the independence of the judiciary, which includes not allowing family, social, political, financial, or other relationships to influence official conduct or judgment. But the justices failed to explain how exactly the code will work or who will enforce it. Now, it may be hard to believe, but the U.S. Supreme Court has never had to adhere to a code of ethics, even though just about every other judge in the United States does. Instead, the Constitution says Supreme Court justices can serve as long as they exhibit good behavior. But what constitutes good behavior has been thrown into question after a series of media reports raised concerns about the influence inside America's highest court. ProPublica reported that conservative Justice Clarence Thomas never disclosed lavish vacations and tuition paid for by a Republican mega donor. Justice Samuel Alito never disclosed a paid-for luxury trip to Alaska with another conservative donor, while the Associated Press alleges that liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor's staff prodded public institutions to buy her books, works that have earned her millions of dollars. The reports, alongside controversial rulings in the past few years, including the overturning of abortion rights in the U.S., have tarnished the court's reputation. And a recent Gallup poll found that public trust and approval in the court is near record lows. In Austin, Tony Waterman reporting for DD India.
Well, the U.S. House of Representatives voted on Monday to pause the effort to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, halting a Republican campaign that alleges he has been derelict in his duty of managing the U.S.-Mexico border. The articles of impeachment introduced by Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on Thursday contend that Mayorkas, an appointee of Democratic President Joe Biden, violated his oath of office by failing to constrain the record numbers of migrants arriving at the border. The House voted to refer the articles back to the House Homeland Security Committee, which is carrying out its own investigation of Mayorkas's alleged dereliction of duty. The move comes as Congress has less than 5 days to extend funding or send the U.S. into its 4th partial government shutdown in a decade. And former U.S. President Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., defended his father's real estate portfolio during a civil fraud trial. Trump and two of his sons have been accused of inflating his net worth by over $2.2 billion to secure better financing. The lawsuit by New York Attorney General seeks at least $250 million in damages, as well as restrictions that would bar Trump and his sons from state's real estate industry. Donald Trump Jr. accused the authorities of carrying out a witch hunt against his family. His father is one of President Joe Biden's main challengers in the 2024 polls.
But it doesn't matter because it's a witch hunt. It always has been. But the precedent that it sets for New York business, if you don't perhaps donate to Letitia James' re-election campaign, I too will go after your billion-dollar transactions. It's ripe for extortion and corruption, but, that's what you get from the Democrat Party in New York these days.
Well, over 2,000 delegates are gathered at the United Nations Environment Programme headquarters in Nairobi to forge out a global treaty to combat plastic pollution. But while there's consensus that the pact is needed, there's bound to be differing views on what should be included in the document. DD India's Isabel Nakaria reports from Kampala.
Around 60 nations are seeking rules to reduce the use and manufacture of plastics made from fossil fuels. Last year, more than 170 countries agreed to have a UN treaty to stop plastic pollution. Many environment groups have backed the idea, but plastic-producing countries, including the US, are against it. Countries like the US prefer to promote better waste management, like recycling, while less developed countries are worried the pact may affect their economies, still earning from production of plastic. The negotiations are expected to be heated as nations debate on what should make up the policy. On Saturday, hundreds held a demonstration on the streets of Nairobi to rally support on cutting down the amount of plastic produced. Environment campaigners warn plastic pollution could double in the next 20 years. Only 10% of plastic is recycled, while millions of tons are dumped in the environment, including water bodies. Isabel Nakaria in Kampala, reporting for DD India.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. Indian Commerce Minister attends IPF meet in US, holds several bilateral meetings. EAM Jaishankar meets newly appointed UK Home Secretary and Defence Secretary in London. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's new cabinet meets for the first time later on Tuesday.
A world that never stops, where information shapes our reality. One app stands out, helps you stay ahead of time. Introducing the DD India app, your gateway to a world of news right at your fingertips. Your most trusted source of news goes global, goes digital. Explore a world of options, top stories, live updates, in-depth analysis, and more. Stay informed wherever you are. Real-time alerts keep you ahead of the curve always. The DD India app, connecting you to the world one story at a time. Download now and explore the world of knowledge, insights, and authentic information.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, India is attending the APEC summit as a guest of US President Biden, aimed at finalizing an Indo-Pacific economic framework. DD India's Simon Marks is in San Francisco and says the White House is trying to manage expectations for the summit's outcome.
India is represented here at the APEC summit by Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal in India's capacity as a guest economy for this gathering of APEC nations. But the minister is going to have a very, very busy few days. It's already been announced that he's going to be participating in the third in-person ministerial meeting aimed at forging the final text for the Indo-Pacific economic framework. US officials speaking over the last few hours would not be drawn on whether there is going to be final language for the IPEF released at this APEC summit, but certainly that was a goal of the Biden administration going into it. Minister Goyal will also be representing India at the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. That's an IPEF investor forum that is being held here on the fringes of the APEC summit. He'll also be meeting with CEOs from across the United States because one of the aims of this summit is to try and promote trade between the host nation, APEC members, and in the case of India, a very important guest economy. And so those meetings with CEOs seen as very important as conversations advance on trade barriers, trade and investment, and greater cooperation in areas including technology and innovation. More broadly here, there is considerable attention, of course, being focused on Wednesday's planned meeting between President Biden of the United States and President Xi Jinping of China, the first time that the two men have met in person since the G20 summit in Bali last November. And one of the questions hanging over this meeting between the two presidents is whether they can create lines of communication so they can manage the competition between the US and China responsibly and avoid it veering off into conflict. And the issue of whether a final declaration is going to be issued, well, the Americans certainly say that they are hoping to take a leaf out of Thailand's book last year, the hosts of the 2022 APEC summit, and secure some kind of consensus. US officials, the hosts of this event, simply said over the last few hours that they are working very hard to try and overcome what they described as frictions that have emerged in discussions over the possible wording of any final declaration. Simon Marks for DD India at the APEC summit in San Francisco.
And U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said that finance ministers of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation countries have affirmed their interest in expanding output sustainability. Yellen also noted that substantial progress has been made on trade. However, she added that the talks will take more time to conclude. The U.S. Treasury Secretary also pushed for funding the transition to low-carbon energy.
APEC members have affirmed a shared interest in pursuing policies that expand the productive capacity of our economies while also achieving outcomes like reducing inequality and protecting the environment. In the United States, we're doing this through an historic trifecta of legislation: President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIPS Act, and Inflation Reduction Act. I'm pleased that other APEC economies recognize the potential of this strategy and are pursuing similar policies, including ones that support research and development, invest in infrastructure, and drive labor force participation.
Well, India's Union Minister for Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, has held bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in the U.S. city of San Francisco. Goyal held talks with the United States Trade Representative, Catherine Tai. He also met with the South Korean Trade Minister. The IPEF has 14 members.
Likewise. How are you doing? Yeah.
Well, earlier, the Commerce Minister met with Singapore's Minister for Trade and Industry, Gan Kim Yong, on the sidelines of IPF in San Francisco. The two sides look to advance trade and commerce between the two nations. During the meeting, the leaders emphasized ways of enhancing cooperation between India and Singapore in emerging and futuristic areas. India's Commerce Minister, Piyush Goyal, who is on a visit to the United States from November 13th to the 16th to attend the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework Ministerial meeting. Goyal has also been invited to attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco.
One day it got frozen.
Well, U.S. electric car maker Tesla is on its way to double components imports from India. Indian Trade Minister Piyush Goyal visited Tesla's state-of-the-art manufacturing facility at Fremont, California on Tuesday. Minister noted the contribution of Indian engineers and finance professionals to Tesla's incredible quest to revolutionize mobility in senior roles. Well, India's Patrick Falk joins us live for more on this. Well, Patrick, what does China hope to achieve out of the talks between the leader Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden, a meeting much awaited?
Yeah, absolutely. All eyes on that discussion taking place, which is somewhat overshadowing the APEC summit itself. And there is a sense that Beijing does genuinely want to get ties on a better footing with Washington. The state-run Global Times said the two leaders, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, had a complex set of bilateral and global issues to discuss, and it seemed to put an emphasis on stabilizing economic ties. There certainly is an incentive for President Xi to do that, because China really has failed to recover economically since it's reopened off the back of harsh and self-imposed COVID restrictions. And the article talked about the two leaders needing to get together to lead the global economy out of its current predicament. But it did also take aim at the Americans for cracking down on Chinese companies under the guise of national security. So perhaps President Xi will want to get some concessions in that regard. He does have some bargaining chips, as we heard just a moment ago. The Americans very much want to keep communication lines between the two sides open, and in particular wants to reopen military-to-military communications, which President Xi would be perfectly within his power of doing so. The Americans think that it's important, as we heard just a while ago, to do this, to manage their differences responsibly and to stop this rivalry from veering into conflict. At the same time, though, any concrete outcomes may be limited, but it does seem as though this meeting that's taking place will put the world's two biggest powers on a steadier footing with one another.
Well, Patrick, also ahead of this important meeting, China's former ambassador to the U.S. has literally warned that the risk of war will increase if Washington does not respect the one China principle. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. Choi Tan-kai is China's longest-serving former U.S. ambassador, and so what he says does carry some weight. He was speaking at a closed-door family office summit that was taking place in Hong Kong, and he said that Beijing was willing to negotiate anything so long as Washington respects the one China policy. It is the one China principle, I should say. It is worth noting that the U.S. acknowledges the one China policy as opposed to the one China principle, which really is slightly different in that it acknowledges that the PRC sees Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory, rather than acknowledging that Taiwan is part of China's sovereign territory. But regardless, this is an issue that is a red line for Beijing. It is an area where the two countries are going to find it very, very difficult indeed to see eye to eye with one another. We are also seeing separate reports that Taiwan is trying to engage with President Biden for a one-on-one summit on the sidelines of the APEC summit as well. that won't be with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen when it does not send the president to these sorts of summits, but it would be with an island representative instead. The US has not confirmed whether or not this might take place, but has said that it welcomes Taiwan's participation in the event.
All right, all eyes on the meeting. Thank you so much for joining us from there and giving us that information, Patrick. And moving on, US President Joe Biden greeted Indonesian President Joko Widodo at the White House as the two leaders prepare for an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco for talks on regional security and clean energy transition, among other topics. The Indonesian president had a discussion on many topics, including Israel-Hamas conflict, among other things, with the US president. And South Korea has welcomed defense ministers and representatives of the United Nations Command that comprises 17 countries. The UNC is a group of countries, including the US, UK, Australia and Turkey, which sent troops or contributed medical support during the 1950 to 53 Korean War. Established in 1950, the UNC was mandated to restore peace and enforce the armistice while acting as a channel of communication with North Korea. It is led by the commander of the US military stationed in South Korea. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Chris from Tokyo. Well, Chris, what can we expect from this meeting?
Well, we're very likely to see a call from the UNC countries and from South Korea on for North Korea to end its ongoing missile activity, the rhetoric it's been using about developing and enhancing its nuclear arsenal to the extent that it exists, because the surveillance on the ground is very thin in North Korea, and to end the illegal activities it is conducting. Of course, it is forbidden by UN Security Council resolutions to test ballistic technology, as it has been doing, and so there's likely to be a call for that to end. As you mentioned, just a little bit of history is that these countries are a group which has always supported North Korea ever since the 38th parallel was drawn up, and to that extent has largely always opposed to some extent or another the development and growth of North Korea, and so Pyongyang has expressed that it feels very threatened by US-led alliances such as this, which are also expected to call for quote a group response or joint response to quote contingencies on the peninsula. No clarification about what that means, but clearly looking for some kind of group response or agreement on a group response to any economic or military action that may be needed. There may be more light shed on that after this meeting.
All right. How important do you feel it is considering the dysfunction in the UNSC in passing new sanctions against North Korea and Pyongyang's growing relationship with Russia?
Yeah, these countries really have to look at what tools are left in their toolbox, to pursue their interests on the Korean Peninsula. Russia and China are not allowing, and have not for the last year or so, any new sanctions to be imposed on Pyongyang. They are citing as justification that US-led countries have failed to keep their promise to balance out these sanctions with humanitarian support for the civilians who may be affected by those sanctions as a side effect. So they really have to evaluate and look at what options are still on the table. One of them is, enhancing, as they say, or improving the coordinated sanctions that are in place and enforcing those, such as Canada deploying the HMS Vancouver to enforce sanctions in the maritime sphere, such as targeting the potential for North Korea to fund its missile program through cryptocurrency theft or allegations of that. Another is to look for other types of deterrence, such as this potential joint call for a response to any, quote, contingencies on the peninsula. There may be hopes that that may act as a deterrent as well.
All right. Thank you so much for that information, Chris. And take a look at other stories making news around the world. U.S. Secret Service agents in Washington fired shots at 3 people who attempted to break into an unmarked vehicle. The suspects immediately fled the scene. The agents were accompanying Naomi Biden in the neighborhood at the time. In Japan, climate change and heavy rains have delayed the Ayu sweet fish's spawning period, leading to a decline in catches. Fishermen now use trained birds to catch Ayu in ukai tradition. However, fishermen have turned to tourism to supplement income. Gyeonse's auction house is set to host an online auction on December 14, featuring over 30 lots from the 20th century. Auction will include Elvis Presley's 6th grade report card and Bob Dylan's first album master recordings. Also a handwritten note from President John F. Kennedy's, personal items from author Henry Miller, a Yankees World Series ticket tub, and a 1950 Coney Island carousel horse. Britain's King Charles III is celebrating his 75th birthday on Tuesday. King Charles III, born in 1948, was anointed and crowned on May 6, 2023, after his mother, Queen Elizabeth's death in 2022. The Archbishop of Canterbury placed the 360-year-old St. Edward's crown on Charles' head in Westminster Abbey. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Ukraine says Russians intensify bombardment of Avdiivka. Yellen says she disagrees with Moody's outlook on U.S. debt. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and time now for a quick recap of the headlines. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will pursue war against Hamas to the end. Defense Minister Gallant says Hamas has lost control in Gaza. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is in US to attend IPF APEC meetings, holds bilateral meeting with US Trade Representative Catherine Tai on sidelines of IPF, also holds meetings with the South Korean and Singapore's counterpart. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar meets UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, also addresses Indian community in London. Well, moving on, strengthening bilateral ties with UK Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met with newly appointed UK Home Secretary James Cleverly in London on Monday. Jaishankar, who is currently on an official visit to the UK, expressed appreciation for Cleverly's unwavering support, underscoring the continued strength of the strategic partnership between India and the UK. Both leaders not only discussed the importance of mobility, skills and talent in the development of our bilateral cooperation, but also exchanged views in addressing shared concerns on extremism, economic offences, trafficking and security. Earlier, Jaishankar also engaged in a discussion with the UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. Boosting defence and security cooperation between the two nations took the centre stage during their discussion. Jaishankar also highlighted the promising avenues for collaboration through the Make in India initiative, offering new opportunities for British partners. The leaders also exchanged perspectives on pressing global security challenges, emphasising the convergences in their strategic approaches. Also, India's External Affairs Minister addressed the Indian community at a Diwali reception in London. He hailed the community for making a powerful contribution in India-UK relations. The External Affairs Minister said that a new India is coming into being and that a transformation is underway in the country.
Many of those changes are reflected in the engine of growth. I began by saying the world has changed, our relationship has changed, UK has changed, India has changed. So you may ask me, what has changed in India? You know the answer. The answer is Modi. Initiatives like Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao, initiatives about building toilets for girls, about the Jan Dhan Yojana, the financial inclusion, about building houses, the Awas Yojana. When you see the cumulative impact of all of this on the lives of people, that is the change which is underway in India.
And DD India's correspondent Akshay Dongre joins us for more on this. Well, Akshay, in lieu of the strategic partnership between both the countries, External Affairs Minister and Cameron have exchanged views on the situation in West Asia, the Ukraine conflict and the Indo-Pacific. Can you tell us what has latest transpired there?
Well, as far as the bilateral talks between the Foreign Secretary and Dr. S. Jaishankar, our Foreign Minister, is concerned, is the fact that the leaders have spoken about the strategic issues, geopolitical issues that concern both the countries. Now, when we talk about UK, the Ukraine war has been significantly impacting the entire of Europe, and that has been the reason why UK has been very much invested in that particular domain as well, be it sending aid, be it helping the Ukraine militarily rather. UK has been involved, and that is why the talks become very important as far as the two leaders are concerned. However, when we talk about India, India has been more concerned about what is happening on its west, especially in the Middle East, where the conflict between Israel and Hamas has been spilling over to the region, stoking fears that this may in fact increase the oil prices. That will become a huge concern as far as India is concerned, be it from the strategic point of view or financially as well. So these are the issues that were discussed with Mr. David Cameron and Dr. S. Jaishankar. However, besides the strategic and geopolitical issues, certain other issues were also discussed. As far as the defense ties are there, then Dr. S. Jaishankar has also spoken to the defense leadership there when we talk about the internal issues of the United Kingdom, as far as that significantly concern the security of India and Indians. We have seen that with the talks, when the talks took place between Mr. Cleverly and Dr. Jaishankar, both the leaders talked about the issues, especially that concern India. As far as UK's internal issues are concerned, what we have seen in the past few months is the fact that be it Canada or in UK, certain Khalistani elements have been trying to, in fact, threaten India. We have seen the attack on the British High Commission. So all of these issues have been of great concern for the Foreign Ministry of India as well. And that is why these issues, in fact, a range of issues have been discussed, from finance to defense to the internal issues of the countries, as well as the geopolitical issues. So as far as the 5-day visit is concerned, all aspects of the bilateral relations are being touched upon by the Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who's on a 5-day trip to the UK.
All right. Akshay, also India and UK are discussing a proposal for a visit by Sunak to New Delhi on an invitation from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Any information on that?
Well, certainly, once the foreign minister is there in the UK, FTA, in fact, has been one of the most ambitious, project between these two countries, and that is why, even though the commerce minister is right now not in the UK, so all the modalities and all the nitty-gritties of the free trade agreements cannot be, in fact, finalized. However, with the foreign minister being in the UK, a groundwork certainly can be laid down as far as how a planning can be done to go ahead with the free trade agreement that is going to be very ambitious, not just for the UK, but for India as well. India is a huge market that the UK is trying to tap, especially after the Brexit. So it remains to be seen that what exactly will be the outcome. However, certainly some sort of groundwork, some sort of discussions are planned in order for the free trade agreement to roll out smoothly whenever it does.
Right, Akshay, thank you so much for that information. And moving on, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's new cabinet meets for the first time later on Tuesday. He brought former Prime Minister David Cameron back into government as Foreign Secretary as part of a wider ministerial reshuffle. DD India's Ollie Barrett reports from London.
Well, when that new cabinet gathers for the first time, it will be familiar in many ways for David Cameron, who has sat round the cabinet table in Downing Street many, many times before. But previously, it was as Prime Minister, and his is absolutely the most surprising face that will be gathering at Cabinet later on. Very much a surprise for all of Westminster to see David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, returning to government at the request of Rishi Sunak to take on that Foreign Secretary role.
And I'm pleased to have appointed a new Foreign Secretary who will build on everything that we have achieved in the last year.
This broader reshuffle, which has seen a new Health Secretary, a new Environment Secretary, a new Home Secretary as well after Suella Braverman was sacked, is designed by Rishi Sunak to be a reset ahead of the next general election. He wants the best possible team in place to get ready to fight that election. The opposition Labour Party say that this reshuffle is laughable in their words. They say that Rishi Sunak has been trying to present himself as a candidate of change, but that he heads up a government that now has a Foreign Secretary who's being recalled to government after several years away and having previously been Prime Minister of a Conservative administration. So a controversial appointment in other ways too. Some Conservatives feel that David Cameron's foreign policy wasn't very successful when he was Prime Minister, and they wonder whether he is the best man for the job as a result. But Rishi Sunak sees him as someone who can appeal to voters in the centre ground of British politics. As I say, he is gearing up for an election campaign which will have to begin at some point fairly soon. The next election in the UK has to be called by January 2025, but could be earlier than that.
Well, as Russia-Ukraine conflict rages on, Ukraine claims that bombardment in eastern Ukrainian town of Avdiivka has intensified. As per Ukrainian officials, Russian forces had suffered heavy losses around the city. They also said that their forces had repelled Russian attacks in other areas of the 1,000 kilometers front line. Russia has focused on eastern Ukraine since failing to advance to Kyiv in the early days of the 20-month-old conflict, and in mid-October launched a push to seize Avdiivka, 20 kilometers from the Russian-held city of Donetsk. And roads near Grindavik in Iceland were closed to the public due to a potential volcanic eruption. Almost 4,000 people were evacuated from the town, fearing molten rock could hit the coastal town and a geothermal power station. The town experienced ground shaking, road cracking and structural damage. The Reykjanes Peninsula in southern Iceland has been a hotspot for volcanic activity since March 2021, when lava fountains erupted from a fissure in the Fagradal volcanic system. In August 2022, a 3-week eruption occurred, followed by another in July 2021. And Australia is introducing a new law that will toughen restrictions on how industries and universities share defence technology with foreigners. This law will exempt AUKUS partners Britain and the United States from such controls as per draft of the measure. The law is meant to replicate US export controls to defence technology, seen as a key step to beginning the AUKUS plan to build a new class of nuclear-powered submarine in Australia and Britain. The proposed law creates 3 criminal offences, further restricts sharing of defence technology to foreign persons inside and outside Australia, while allowing licence-free sharing among the AUKUS partners. Australian universities are reliant on international collaboration, and a third of research students came from overseas, with China the top source. And Mexico's former foreign minister, Marcelo Ebrard, ended weeks of speculation by announcing his stay in the ruling leftist National Regeneration Movement. Earlier, Ebrard was seeking the presidency in 2024 with an opposition party. Speaking at a press conference, Ebrard said that he had reached an understanding with Morena's presidential candidate, former Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum, after in September he rejected the results of the party's presidential primaries as riddled with irregularities. Ebrard, a longtime ally of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, built his reputation as a socially progressive mayor of Mexico City between 2006 and 2007, when he decriminalized abortion and legalized same-sex marriage in the capital. And Myanmar's junta has imposed a curfew in the western city of Sittwe, according to a government document and media reports, amid a surge in fighting on several fronts between the military and ethnic minority insurgent groups. Residents of Sittwe in the western state of Rakhine have been ordered not to leave their homes after 9 p.m. and businesses must close by 8:30 p.m. or face legal action, according to a notice issued by the local administrative authority. Fighting was occurring across Rakhine State, according to a resident and a spokesperson for the Arakan Army, a group fighting for greater autonomy that has seized a military post in Ratadong and Minpya. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. India is celebrating Children's Day today. This date was chosen to coincide with the birthday of India's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who was known to be very fond of children and advocated for their rights and education. President of India, Draupadi Murmu, met with various students belonging to schools and institutes at the President House in New Delhi on the occasion. In the Himalayan state of Uttarakhand, relief and rescue work is underway in the Silkyara under construction tunnel for the third day. The rescue forces made a plan to take the workers out safely by putting big pipes inside the tunnel. Around 40 workers are trapped in the tunnel, and authorities said all are safe and being sent food and water. Amid the rising pollution level in the northern India, the stubble burning continues in the Indian state of Punjab. The air quality improved in Delhi after the rainfall, but after Diwali, it is continuously deteriorating, with AQI standing near 400 in severe category on Tuesday morning. A peculiar video that stands out from the ordinary, shared by the Government of India in an incredible fusion of technology and tradition. A robot performed Aarti of Lord Ganesha. The robot is manufactured by Orangewood Robotics Company. And still to come on DD India News Hour. New Delhi gears up for another mega event. 42nd India International Trade Fair 2023 set to be inaugurated today. World Diabetes Day today to spread awareness on diabetes prevention and treatment. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. And moving on, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen rejected Moody's outlook on U.S. debt, saying that the country's economy is strong. The ratings agency on Friday lowered its outlook on the U.S. credit rating to negative from stable, citing large fiscal deficits.
Let me start with the Moody's decision. They maintained the U.S. AAA rating, but indicated that there's a negative outlook. This is a decision that I disagree with. The American economy is fundamentally strong, and Treasury securities remain the world's preeminent safe and liquid asset. We have enjoyed over the past several years an historically fast economic recovery from a deep recession.
And the U.S. investors are cautious after the U.S. credit rating was downgraded last week, with a possible government shutdown looms this weekend. And key inflation data is due to be out this week. DD India's Sally Patterson has more from New York.
Investors this week have their eyes on the upcoming US Consumer Price Index report for October, which is due out on Tuesday. Economists expect core CPI growth, which strips out food and energy, to remain steady at 0.3% month over month. This key inflation data could give an indication of what the Federal Reserve might do at their next rate decision in December. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has said he wouldn't rule out a rate hike. Also coming up this week, the producer price report for October and October retail sales data, which should offer clues about consumer health. Investors are also digesting last week's decision by Moody's Investor Service to lower its US credit rating outlook from stable to negative. The ratings firm cited the nation's worsening fiscal position and political polarization for the downgrade. At the close of trading Monday, the Dow was up 0.2%, the S&P was flat, and the Nasdaq ended down 0.2%. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
And Asian shares inched up on Tuesday in cautious trading ahead of a crucial U.S. inflation report that could heavily influence the Federal Reserve's policy outlook, while the fragile yen flirted with one-year lows, putting it back in the intervention zone. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan was 0.49% higher, while Tokyo's Nikkei gained 0.36%. Australia's S&P ASX 200 index was up 0.61%. The U.S. inflation report, due later in the day, has investors' attention on Tuesday, especially after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and policymakers have said they are still not sure that interest rates are high enough to tame inflation. And back home, the 42nd edition of India International Trade Fair is beginning in the capital city of New Delhi on Tuesday. It is going to be the biggest ever international trade fair at the newly redeveloped Pragati Maidan complex. The theme this year is Vasudev Kutumbakam. United by trade, women entrepreneurs from the SAARC countries will be a key focus of this year's trade fair. SAARC countries are also setting up pavilions to showcase their best products and business to the world. Other countries like Turkey, Qatar, Bahrain will be major participants at the International Trade Fair. The mega event is scheduled to be held between 14th and 27th of November this year. More than 1 million people are expected to visit the trade fair this year. And World Diabetes Day is celebrated every year on 14th of November, and the day is an opportunity to raise awareness about diabetes as a global public health issue and decide the strategies as to what needs to be done collectively and individually for better prevention, diagnosis and management of the condition.
14th November is observed as World Diabetes Day. Often referred to as a lifestyle disease, diabetes is rising among masses in India and abroad. Diabetes is a disease that occurs when your blood sugar is too high, your body doesn't make enough or any insulin or doesn't use the insulin properly.
30 साल की उम्र में ही आप
Get blood glucose tested by the age of 30. If you have risk factors like obesity and heart disease, take steps to prevent diabetes. Work on improving your lifestyle. Have regular and balanced diets. Consume more salad, vegetables and proteins. Avoid refined and processed food. Practice a minimum of 30 to 40 minutes of walking or exercise. Do exercise, swimming, yoga and dancing to burn calories. Avoid smoking and alcohol.
World Diabetes Day provides an opportunity to raise awareness of diabetes as a global public health issue and what needs to be done collectively and individually for better prevention, diagnosis and management of the condition. Kiran Bharadwaj's report for DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. Time now for some sports news. The International Cricket Council has named 3 cricketers to its Hall of Fame. Legendary Indian opening batsman Virendra Sehwag, Diana Adalji, a trailblazer of Indian women's cricket, and Sri Lankan superstar Aravinda de Silva. The 3 legends will be honoured during the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup semi-final between India and New Zealand at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai.
International Cricket Council on Monday announced the cricketers inducted into the ICC Hall of Fame as the class of 2023. Former ICC ODI World Cup winners Aravinda De Silva and Virendra Sehwag have been inducted as part of class of 2023 along with pioneering Indian women's cricketer Diana Edulji. De Silva, Edulji and Sehwag will join as inductees number 110, 111 and 112. De Silva enjoyed a 19-year international career for Sri Lanka, notably playing a starring role in their memorable run to victory at the ICC Cricket Men's World Cup in 1996. Upon his induction, De Silva said, "This achievement is a tribute to the dedication, sacrifice and love that have shaped my cricketing journey. My family, my parents, my sister, my wife and children are my anchor and deserve the deepest thanks for their unwavering support and sacrifice which have propelled me towards success." Edulji becomes the first Indian female inducted into the ICC Hall of Fame. She had a 17-year-old long international playing career and played pioneering role in establishing the most successful domestic team in Indian women's cricket history. Edulji said, "It indeed is a great honor to be the first Indian women's cricketer to be inducted and join a galaxy of cricketers, male and female, from across the world. I am delighted to be considered for this award. It is not only a proud moment for me, my family and friends, but also for BCCI and Indian women's cricket team." Sehwag was also a pivotal figure in the World Cup winning campaign for India back in the year 2011, and his record-breaking career spanned for 14 years and over 17,000 runs in international cricket. Sehwag said, "I would like to thank the ICC and the jury for inducting me with this honor. I feel extremely grateful for having spent a great part of my life doing what I loved most, hitting the cricket ball." Sehwag scored a total 23 Test centuries during his illustrious career, the fifth most by an India men's player, with his highest score of 319 against South Africa in Chennai in 2008, the best of any Indian player ever. Sehwag totaled 8,273 runs for India in 50-over cricket, and his 219 against the West Indies in Indore in 2011 remains the third highest score achieved by any men's player at ODI level. Sports Desk, DD India.
And as the Indian Festival of Lights, Diwali, was celebrated globally on Sunday, US President Joe Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden also lit the diya in White House to symbolize Diwali's message of seeking the light of wisdom, love and unity over the darkness of hate and division. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.